screen. We're good. All right, so this is Dead by Daylight, and we're going to be talking about lore, but more importantly, we're going to be talking about two main things. We're going to be talking about the main characters who have either escaped the entity or they seem to have some extraordinary knowledge about how the entity works its dark, evil magic. And so, that being said, very quickly as we go into the next slide, let's introduce everybody very quickly. So, I am a human. Tell us how long you've played Dead by Daylight, and how about your favorite killer?
I've been playing for like what 5, 6 years now, and I really like Pyramid Head.
Nice.
Also, the Switch sucks.
Nice. I realize that I've been playing since chapter 2 or 3 when Clown was brand new. That's a while. All right, Ricky, introduce yourself and how long you've been playing the game and what's your favorite character to play in game.
I'm Anomalous Ricky. I've been playing. I think I started playing about 4 years ago, and then I took after about 6 months or so. I took a hiatus for a couple of years,
Sure.
and I just came back to it uh, maybe about 4 or 5 months ago.
Right.
My favorite killer was Wraith, but now I'm starting to lean towards Ghostface.
Nice.
Pretty fun.
All right. Well, welcome. And Siri, introduce
Hi,
yourself
hi,
briefly.
hi. Hello, I am Siri Lush. I have been playing for the past year now, only about like 48 hours. Um, I'm a casual player, so I don't play often, and my currently favorite killer is the artist.
Nice. And I will say this about Siri. There was one live stream when I played with her, and it was actually the first time she ever played. And she has like skills as Survivor. She was like looping the killer. I mean, she'd get downed every so often, but she has really good situational awareness. And so Siri, if she spent more time in the game, she'd be like crazy and saying good. But again, welcome to all the panelists, and thank you for being a part of it. I will give just the general awareness to anybody that's watching. We're just kind of chilling. This is not an all awareness about everything in Dead by Daylight, but this is kind of like a highlight reel, and we're hoping that you enjoy it. And that being said, all the panelists for being here and being a part of it. But that being said, the first thing we have to talk about, it's not actually 8, but 9 because I did a revision at the very, very end, but there are several sub-realms that the killers and survivors can exist in. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later. But um, when you load into the game and you get past the general menu, where are you put? You put at the campfire. You waiting it out, right? And so the very first sub
Wait,
realm we have to talk about, just for a brief moment, and the panelists, I'm not going to read this. You can just read this and then just kind of maybe give your thoughts if it comes up. But I'm not going to be reading the comments. And viewers, you don't want me reading all this text. Feel free to just kind of like read the text as we're talking, and we'll be fine. But that being said, usually when people load in, we're sitting there right at the campfire. From a survivor perspective, we're all victims, and we're just kind of sitting there waiting until the entity loads us into the trials. And we're just kind of waiting, and we get constantly paired with new people. And if you're a killer, what's human? What's the viewpoint of the killer at the campfire? Is the
You
killer
are chilling in the trees watching the survivors.
you chilling in the trees? You ain't getting warm by the fire. The
the
killers,
killer is the Lorax secretly.
yes, they are
I
lurking
speak
in the
from experience.
shadows, but guess what? The killers are also waiting to be summoned by the entity. And so they're not like chilling with the survivors saying, "Hey, sorry I hooked you last game. Nothing personal." But they're in their own exile waiting to be summoned, but they're in the coldness of the forest just looking at the survivors, waiting and wondering who am I going to have to go after next. And so the first area that is kind of like we would think of it as like a DMV room. Okay, I'm taking my number, waiting for my number to get called. That's where the killer and the survivor basically wait to get summoned by the entity. Um, I was talking with all of the panelists in Discord earlier, and they brought up different things, ideas and thoughts, but we have to bring up that depending on what killer you play, you could actually have access to another subrealm other than the actual trial fields. And so some that we'll very quickly mention are the spirit world, the dream world. So, like, what is it? Freddy, right? Freddy's the nightmare.
Yeah.
Otherworld
Mhm.
by Onryo. I remember when I saw Upside Down, I'm like, oh, this is an absolutely gorgeous map, and what they did with it. But Upside Down, uh, and while I'm at this fifth point, what's that desert map where it's very magical and the library's in the middle? You guys remember what?
Yeah.
The artist one,
Yeah, maybe this artist
Forsaken
one.
Boneyard.
I think maybe there's some similarities, possibly, in how the environment reacts. But technically, the upside down would be the next one. The ethereal plane used by the spirit. And again, a person could be like, Mal, are you just making all this up? No, thankfully the panelists, they were like throwing some ideas and thoughts before the live stream. But these are actually subrealms confirmed by Dead by Daylight themselves in either in their official webpage, whether it be maybe like the dev talks. And so these planes, we'll find at a later point in time, they interact with how the killers load into the trial grounds and how they can interact with survivors. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. The Void, again, that's a place that's very interesting because the Void is technically a part of what we the gamer would call the Halloween events. And before I continue, does anybody want to like comment on anything prior to this point? As for subrealms, the spirit world, the dream world, other world, upside down, ethereal plane. Anybody want to chime in on anything? Just kind of. If not, we can move
I
on.
have
Yeah.
never been to the other ones. I don't play killer often, so I'm not
Hmm.
sure about them that
That's
much.
fine. And but no, that's a great point, Siri. And to a new player, when you get pulled into some of these realms, it's like, whoa, what just happened? For example, if you're playing against a Freddy, you're in like we'll just call the normal world trial ground, whatever the map is, and then your little timer starts counting down on the left, right, the left margin. And then when your timer fills up, then all of a sudden your screen goes like all whack, and then you've been pulled from the real world to the killer world, and then now you have to interact with them where the killer has advantages. And so that's a very
Mhm.
easy example to show where if you're just a survivor and maybe you're new to the game, you haven't played against a certain killer, and then all of a sudden the killers have the ability of just setting up portals, and they're like for example the newest killer, what is it, Springtrap? He has like these little
Yeah.
portals, and you just walk through a door, and he has his little control room, and then he just magically appears somewhere else. That would be an example of how the killer has a subrealm that's interacting with the actual trial area where the
I've
survivors.
actually have seen Springtrap's roam. It's just a void.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But I wanted to kind of let everybody just kind of chime in. I'm not asking anybody to carry the discussion, but I wanted to give opportunity.
Uh,
Go ahead.
Not really related to the realms, but Springtrap isn't the latest kill anymore. They
It
just
was.
added one.
You're
Yeah.
right. The one that
Oh, they added a new one?
the really gory
Kresu.
one. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
The Kresu. Yeah.
Relatively
Oh.
new. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
We were. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll say the upside down, at least the map of the upside down in game is really cool. And I've heard, I haven't seen any of them myself, but I've heard that there's actually like in the upside down themed map, there's actually a some Easter eggs about that lead back to Stranger Things, which is what the upside down is originally from.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Now we know that there are some Easter eggs embedded into different maps, whether it be like one map you're in the upside down and there's the entities kind of like stuck in the lockers and they're trying to escape, and there's a few different ones, but yes, the devs are very keen on adding the small attention to details, even in the sub realms. And like for example, I remember the first time I played against Trap, I like walked in. I thought, well, there's actually a button I can click on as a survivor. And the first time, do you think I would get caught the first time? No, 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 no. I wouldn't get caught the first time. I'd walk in and I got teleported to somewhere else. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Where else could it take me? Except the second time, Springtrap was using the portal. And I walked in the second time into the little control room, and then all of a sudden I got smoked. I'm like, what the mess is this? And so the significance of us pointing out subrealms is that it gives the developers a way of allowing the killers to have uniqueness to their gameplay, and in some cases change the reality that the survivors are having to survive in. Like if you're playing against Freddy, you have to constantly be aware, like, hey, I don't want to get caught in the dream state for too long. I need to wake myself up. And so you would take certain measures that would alter your gameplay if that wasn't a factor. So we'll continue on for the sake of time. And the the void is actually a part of the Halloween event. But if you're not familiar, it's actually been brought up by some of the characters in game that the void is the place where the entity scraps survivors and killers that are so emotionally damaged that they can't carry on anymore. And in one entry, the void is listed as, I believe it was the Blight's journal. He cited seeing thousands of souls like roaming the void. And basically, when all the emotion, all the adrenaline rush, and all the fear, and all of the hope, and all these emotions are used up, and then the survivor is like, I can't do it anymore. No, I can't handle it anymore. No, no, no more. Then the entity assesses that there's no more value in that survivor or in that killer, and says, all right, peace out. You're going to the scrapyard. So the void is technically where, according to the Blight, there's thousands of survivors that are just left to rot. And they no longer are summoned for the trials. They're just left behind because there's nothing left of value. And so it's kind of the graveyard of the Dead by Daylight universe. Ironically, as we get deeper into the live stream and we learn more about Blight, Blight actually found a way of coming back from the void. And so, although it seems like the end, people have escaped from the void before. But that being said,
Blight does a lot of shenanigans.
he does a lot of shenanigans. You're absolutely right. And the curious thing is, Blight, or the Alchemist, he actually started as a survivor with we'll just say, a sketchy moral compass. And he read some journals, and he said, well, I'm gonna do some crazy stuff and see what happens when I experiment on this. And he started somehow entering into the forest and experimenting on killers, and it appears perhaps even survivors alike, in his attempt to learn more about the what was it, the flowers, the putrid flowers.
Yeah.
And in his dark path of experimenting on everything that moved, he himself lost his moral compass, and later, when he returned from the void, he became a killer for the entity. And it could be suspected that the only way he got out of the void is he said, hey, I'll come back as a killer. I know all about all the rules of the game, and I'm willing to come back if you get me out of this void. And so it's possible that Blight escaped from the void because he said, all right, I was a survivor and I did my experimenting, but I really want out of here. I want a chance to escape. And he basically sold his soul and became a killer. But that being said, as we continue on, the next area is the overlaps. And you know, when I was reading this lore, can you guys, the panelists, still see the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do apologize that you guys are seeing this for the first time in real time, but you know, I guess we'll just make do with it. But there are some times in events where you kind of see like fog kind of billowing out of different map areas, and so the interesting thing is that there are some places in the trials that there was one journal that said that I got downed as a survivor and I was crawling away and the killer was not able to um, capture me. He was not able to continue. So it would seem that the overlaps are that area of the map that is just outside the trial grounds. If you say, for example, you leave an exit gate, and then there's, if you approach the exit gate, you can see kind of this, like the black thorns kind of like coming up out of the ground. And then when you leave, they come up behind you, and then the killer can't walk through them. It would appear that the overlaps are the edges of maps, or we would call it the trial grounds, where the entity or the killer, they can't pass that overlap area. And so there may be some kind of barriers between the killer and the survivor. Now, does anybody played Hattie Carr as a survivor?
I have.
You have? Do you remember what her perks are? We haven't got to the perks, but what was the big thing you remembered about her?
I have not played her, so.
Oh, okay, you haven't. Okay, my bad. I misunderstood. Anybody else?
The big clairvoyant one, if I remember.
Yeah, and
Or the witches.
yeah, and the thing about her is apparently she can sense where these areas are, and so it appears that some of the survivors, as they're basically pulled by the entity into the fog, if they were magical before they got pulled into the fog, they bring some of their magical ability into basically the Dead by Daylight universe. And so Hattie is named in a journal as being one of the people that can actually sense memories and where these overlap areas are. And so could it be that like in future events, like there will be something about her that comes into play? Maybe. Maybe so. Or other people that have this magical ability. And so maybe in some future event we'll get some little factor about that. And then, you know, Human, thank you for all the stuff you've been posting, and as well as all the other panelists that have. But the tower, what did you remember reading about the tower and the observer? What was some of the things about them? Human.
The observer tower.
Yeah.
It doesn't like specify where it is. It's just kind of around in like a sort of stasis state.
Yes, that is true. And we'll actually read some of his journals. We're going to read some of the observer journals later on. But the best I can tell is the Muppet can't go anywhere, but he's basically locked in this tower. Maybe he's sitting there watching Netflix, chilling, but he has access to the memories of the trial grounds, memories of the killers, and memories of the survivors, but in his own words, he can't leave. And so the tower...
The word observer is sort of a thing where it's like he's observing like each sort of like trial, possibly.
Yes.
Because it sounds like that, and then maybe he's a recorder of some sort. I don't know much about this, so.
Right, and it could be. It is true that I think Human, you'd mentioned like a few seasons ago, when they introduced like the memory sections, there was a little video of him like sitting in his recliner reading a book, and like he had like a magical sphere in his hand. We actually don't have any pictures of the observer. Ironically enough, there's nothing to observe about the observer, but uh, he is sitting in this library of sorts. And Siri, you're right. He does have access to the memories and the knowledge of trials. So we would think, oh, I'm gonna play a match as a survivor, and maybe I get ended and I die, or maybe I escape and I escape through hatch. Well, the memory of that match is somewhere in the tower. So, the next time Ricky plays as a killer and gets a 4K, the memory of him as a killer in that particular match in the trial grounds is recorded somewhere in the tower. And so if you look at that video, there's all these books lining all these bookcases, and contained within the books are the recorded histories and memories, but it was said of the observer that he doesn't know what's in all the books, and so he has to sit there and leaf through them looking for valuable memories.
Okay.
So it appears something
sort of-
magical is basically growing the library that's in the tower, and the observer is safe from the entity, but he can't leave. He's trapped, and all he can do is just kind of pick a book off the shelf and start reading and figure out, is there anything of value here? And then that's how we get some of the observer journals.
So does that mean like he's trying to figure out a way out through those records? Then?
Yes, and the interesting thing, although we're not quite there yet, that's a bit further down the road. He mentioned that he's got knowledge, generational knowledge. So there are people, generations older than the observer, that have had access to the tower.
There's also the observer. One thing a lot that kind of surprised me is the observer is a personal being. Is very personal. He has favorite memories that he will go back and reread.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I remember I was going over the lore for David King,
Mm-hmm.
and the observer is like, this is one of my favorite memories, and it goes through and the memories aren't just limited to what happens in the trial grounds either. He has access to memories of things they did before they were brought into the fog.
Oh, really? No, I have not read
Yeah.
that.
So this one, there was one memory
That's
he has of
interesting.
David King, and it's one of his favorite memories, where David King is basically a loan shark, and he's trying to get this guy to repay his loan.
Mm-hmm.
And to scare him into repaying his loan, he takes a gas can, pours whatever's inside all over the guy, lights a match, and drops it, and the guy is so scared his eyes pop.
Oh my gosh.
And like it doesn't light because David King had put water in the gas can, but it was convincing enough the guy thought it was gasoline and stuff. But the observer this isn't in the initial lore spiel about David King. This is in one of the memories the observer has about David King, and he refers to it as one of his favorite memories.
Okay, so I stand corrected. Everything that I had read, but obviously the thing to remember, viewers, is that you're watching, and I might be kind of going side by side, but other panelists have read other things in addition. And for example, with the latest update, there's a whole new tome with storyline that's literally being released to the player base. So the lore in the canon is actually like an evolving concept that can be changed, and we learn kind of as we go. But I was not aware that the tower included before the person was taken by the fog. That is very interesting. It really gives off a very omniscient, like all awareness.
Yeah, it's almost as if it chooses. It's like it's not like it's choosing random people. It's choosing people. The entity is choosing people for these trials.
Interesting.
Based off of what he believes is their ability to serve him.
Interesting. And so that's something that the tower is going to reveal more secrets to us, not just in this live stream where we're talking about the observer, but when we get to the survivor next Thursday is going to be the first survivor section, and then the following Thursday will be the first killer section. We're actually going to be getting some of these memories that are from the tower. So we're going to be hearing about the tower and the observer more in the future. And Siri, just as a courtesy note, your 30 minutes is approaching. I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah.
As we go on to the next slide, and again, like it should theoretically all be posted to Internet Land. So if you wanted to catch it later, it'll still be out in Internet Land somewhere. But Siri, thank you so much for being with us this night.
For sure.
Yep. And
Thank you,
so
Siri.
as we go on to the next slide, we just talked about the different sub realms. We're going to transition into talking about the actual, in my thoughts, in my simple brain and mind, what I thought were very important lore characters. Now, you may think to yourself, well, Mal, what do you think is an important lore character? I mean, like, the panelists don't even know this information yet. Obviously, all the killers have their stories, right? All the survivors have their stories. But the interesting thing is that there are several characters that basically have beat the game and they've escaped, or they found a way of manipulating the game, and they have gone to places that are beyond an average killer or an average survivor. And so we're going to focus on, I believe I have 4 of them. So y'all ready? Ready for the next slide?
Ready.
Okay, so actual canon events.
Yeah, so these are actual characters. The first one that we're going to talk about is the Observer. We've talked about the Tower, but very quickly, let's kind of go through these. As we get into future slides, I'm going to kind of give like highlights in yellow. And I don't like yellow any more than other color, but just kind of it makes it pop out a little bit more. And again, you guys can read it. But here's where he says, I'm trapped. I'm trapped in a prison. He called it a tower, so we know it's called the tower, but the observer, he can't escape. He can't leave. He can't, go on vacation to Disney World. He's stuck there. But the entity, for whatever reason, it can't access him and get to him. So he's safe, but he's like in a prison tower. And the one thing we do know about the Observer is he is gone after Tome 12. So, ironically, Tome 12 is the one that I'm currently finishing. That's where you unlock all of the bunny charms. That's Tome 12. But after Tome 12, they took out his menu video, and then he just disappears from lore for a while. And maybe he'll come back. That's unknown. But let's go on to the next one. This is his first entry that we see listed. And again, if there's other ones out on the internet, I don't apologize because this is just kind of like a highlight reel. But he mentioned, and can the panelists still see the screen as I'm clicking? Yeah.
Yes.
He mentioned that he was banished there. Now, how he gets banished there? Well, that's a great question. That we do know that he had generations before him that passed down knowledge, but it doesn't mean that it's his family. It just means that there are people in the tower before him. The interesting thing here, though, is what banished him? What would have been strong enough to banish him that wasn't the entity? Because why would the entity send him to the tower where he has all knowledge? It wasn't the entity that banished him. So
maybe the creator of the entity?
that's true, but
created the entity.
the entity is called one entry. He's called one of the ancients. So the entity is named as like a godlike, ability to manipulate entire worlds and timelines. If we were talking like, about superheroes, he would be like a Thanos or a Galactus power level, where he can just, if he shows up, like stuff's happening. But it's interesting that the Observer, he was banished here by his own words.
It looks like there is some more information. It looks like.
Okay.
By the way.
Okay.
he was banished to the tower by a group called the Council. And part of some of the key reasons for his banishment included his curiosity about Celestials, witnessing a world's destruction, and rebelling against the Council.
Interesting. Now, did you have not to like make it all technical, but what was the source of that? Was that like one of the journals, or was that like
This is from one of the Dead by Daylight wikis. It's not the main
perfect?
wiki, but it's
Okay,
a separate wiki. So
awesome.
this I'd say take it with a grain of salt because it's
Hmm.
not the official wiki,
Sure.
but this is from one of the fan wikis that has a decent level of reputability. Pretty
Nice.
decent level of reputability.
Now, I can bring a little bit of real life knowledge outside of Dead by Daylight, but the ancient Persian culture was very keen on studying the stars and being aware of prophecies and kings to yet be born and kingdoms to fall. And so the idea of um, in a fictional realm of an observer wanting to study the stars and study prophecies and study like ancient works to understand basically the big picture, that's very consistent with like actual world history as to like how a scholar, we would call him a scholar, would pour through books and study ancient scripts looking for like basically dark secrets that tell things to come. And so it's interesting. I've not read about the you said it was called the council. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yes.
That's spicy. But then that's interesting that they banished him.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
they
he,
maybe they thought he was
according,
going to like stumble upon like something that he was not supposed to find. And then, of all places, they banished him where he had unlimited knowledge. That's kind of curious, isn't
yeah,
it?
and it looks like as a bonus point to this, the world destruction that he witnessed was the entity destroyed a world, which led him to want to research the entity, according to this
Yes.
wiki post.
Now, we haven't got there. This is in future live streams, but there are some of the killers and some of the heroes or survivors. They know that the entity exists. They just don't know what it's called. They don't know where it is. They don't know how powerful it is. For
Hmm.
example, one of the killers, uh, uh, human we were talking about. What's the D&D killer? Not
The
the
Lich.
the lich. The lich in ancient scripts, he was reading through and he perceived that what we call the entity was like a world breaker. And the lich wasn't actually captured by the fog. He entered willingly out of curiosity. But basically, yeah. Oh, you'll have to wait for the next live stream to hear about more about the Lich. But there are some characters in the Dead by Daylight universe that actually are aware and they're curious. Well, why the mess is all this stuff happening? And it appears, based on what Ricky had shared, that this observer he went a little bit too far and he got sent off to a prison. So maybe this is a very powerful magical group, and the tower as we know it isn't like actually associated with like the entity directly, but it's like a other strong magical group. That's interesting
It would
information.
it would make sense as to why he's safe from the entity in there.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
maybe the council is strong enough that the entity cannot break through their magic.
And maybe it's possible that the council it has the ability of shielding what the entity can do within their proximity.
Yeah.
And thus we haven't seen someone from the council in Dead by Daylight yet. Like they have the ability of shielding themselves. There's some interesting things, and certainly this will come up again as you continue on to the I believe it's Arcus 54 entry. Listen to this. When you see a dot 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 means there's a lot more text, and I kind of picked like the highlight reel. But
Mhm.
here it's mentioned that the entity absorbs all psychic energy and the thoughts of beings it snatches. So interesting. It's like soaking up energy, soaking up emotions, It's soaking up their thoughts. And notice as it journeys through the endless cosmos. When I read that, I was like, what's that Muppet that he's preceded by the Silver Surfer? Is that Galactus? He's going around like destroying worlds and consuming them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something like Galactus.
I get the vibe that the entity is like has a strategy similar to Galactus, and he's looking for targets. In some entries, it was said that he saw a world and he didn't see anything of value, and he just moved on. So he's assessing these worlds and timelines in real time and saying, "Oh yeah, I like that one. We're gonna grab this Muppet right here," and then he just like takes him into the fog. So maybe it's like a Galactus, method of I'm just moving, growing in power, just moving from timeline to timeline, world to world, and just kind of consuming and absorbing and getting bigger, bigger, bigger. All right, so then as we go on in the same.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yes, go
but
ahead.
I'm gonna head out.
Yep, very good,
See
and
ya.
thank you so much for being with us, Siri. You have a great night.
For sure.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep,
Bye bye. And
talking about Dead by Daylight.
right. All right. And
I
I'm
will
so
say really quickly.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of Dementors from Harry Potter. How they feed off of the memories of the person they're attacking.
Yes, but the difference is that the Dementors couldn't destroy worlds. They had limited power.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think more of the Black Winter from Marvel.
Okay. All right.
Where it's similar to Galactus, but he devours universes rather than simply just planets, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, what's interesting is as we continue on this entry, he kind of shifts thoughts. So this was the last slide. He said he got banished there. The entity is absorbing everything in its path and is journeying, looking for like more targets. But then in the same journal, he switches topics and he starts. This is the first time we see the reference to the fog. That's the first time we see it, is the reference by the fog. So the fog is, all right, say I'm like brand new killer, brand new survivor, and, us, the players, are waiting for a new set to release, like every so many months. Well, of course, in real life, the developers are making the game, but in the story universe, the fog is picking new victims and killers. And the fog is the method and the, we would call it like a portal from their original universe, into the realm of the entity. And I think this is cool, guys. I'm just saying, like I when I had the opportunity to like do a lore series, I'm like I'm gonna go all in. We're gonna have like crazy fun.
A perfect example of what you were just saying will pop up in week 3 or in week 4, the second. Actually next week, the first survivors thing. One of the survivors I researched had actually witnessed the fog.
Now, it is possible. We do have some entries that show, in some rare cases, the survivor has the means of escaping the reach of the fog. Like they have enough strength, they have enough time, they have enough willpower to like escape. But obviously all the characters in the game, they didn't quite make it. They actually were captured by the frog, but not by the frog, but by the fog rather. And it's interesting that it's supposed that it's more conscious than it is material. So it implies consciousness, that the fog is like a living entity of its own. Just possibility. Secondly, all right, so I should be able. Now he's talking about I, the observer. He said I should be able to manifest anything using the techniques passed down from. Oh, I apologize. He did name his family. That's the generations his family members listed. So just like we see the hatch being created that wasn't created by the entity and actually by a survivor, the observer recognizes that there should be a way of manipulating this reality and manifesting stuff into existence. And here we see that techniques could be passed down. Passed down is like speaking of a passage of time. So it's not like using techniques given from my family. He says passed down from my family. So he's saying from the generations before me, at the very least from his, the older generation, like his parents or his grandparents or something.
In when he used to be in the game as the background of a menu, he used to hold an Oris, the little eye thingy,
Right?
and that was the tool that he repaired to let him see through memories, and I think that's probably what he's referring to.
And that may be true from his perspective. He's like, I can manifest this for my benefit while in the tower, but we will find out later that it's possible to manipulate the environment and actually sneak stuff in. We would call it contraband. People sneak contraband stuff into the trial grounds. So for example, manifesting anything and bringing it into the trial grounds. That's when I pick a toolkit or a med kit or a map, or I bring
Or
in
a
like
flashlight.
flashlight, and I'm bringing things into the match. That's the reality that manifesting is possible even for us, the survivors, as much as the killers. But the killers don't bring in objects; they just bring in like uh, like not
Their
perks,
weapons.
like offerings,
Little
like
items
more.
from their lives.
Yes, little trinkets. So their personal equipment and also like moris, like blessings from the entity. So they also have benefits that they bring into matches, just like the survivors can bring in toolkits like flashlights, etc. And then this is where I referenced earlier. The entity is far more ancient than we ever suspected. And then listed down at the very end of that particular entry, and it's suggested it's one of the original ones or an ancient. So that's interesting to hear from the observer thus far. But again, let's go down a little bit further. This is his next entry. Now you'll notice, see how it jumps numbers, right? 54, and then all of a sudden we're at 142. Well, then there's all these other entries that exist in lore, but they haven't been released to the players yet. So the devs have the ability of adding to the lore and continuing the story of the observer anytime they want. So that's a really cool feature for like storyverse perspective. The highlight here is that's speaking about the fog. Now I understand it does all this in order to rip victims from their lives and have them play out an endless trial. So there's the trial reference of terror that it presumably needs for its own survival. And so here we see it's pulling people out of their timelines and out of their worlds to basically play the game.
I think
And
it's also good to note the after the end of what you highlighted, and there perhaps lies the key to its destruction if an agent can be destroyed at all. Almost as if the observer is
looking,
trying to find a way to kill the entity.
yes, and that would make sense because in his mind he is trapped, but he's trying to help whoever finds his journals, or if he can make a way to like get his information outside of the tower to be of help. He's looking for a way. You're absolutely right, and he's trying to find a way of ending the entity. Very good observation, and I guess I could have highlighted it, but thank you for pointing that out. That's a really good point. So his objective is he wants to end this. He wants to end this torment for himself, but also the entity itself, to find a way to end the entity. Great observation. Anything else at this point? We need to pick up pace because we're on slide 13 of 45.
Oh yeah, we
All
should.
right, let's keep on going. So this is the continuation. He's saying, let's end the trials. Destroy its ability to sap the nectar from the dark nectar. That's the emotion. That's the fear. That's the anger. That's the emotions from the survivors. And then he cites it's like a cruel parasite feeding from a flower. But that's curious. That's very telling because he names a flower, and the flower actually was what was used to escape the entity. The only person who ever escaped the entity escaped using a flower. So maybe that's kind of prophetic of sorts. All right, so next, he continues and says that the entity is almost certainly pure consciousness, right? This right here, the last part of this journal, I thought was interesting, at least this particular page. The body, the home, the trial, there he names the trial, all of it is an expression of the entity's unconscious need. And then here we find what it feeds off. Fear and terror. And I'll tell you what, as a gamer, like this is one of the few games that like every time I play it, even though I have hundreds of hours in this game, like when I'm getting chased by a killer, I'm like, oh, I need to run, 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 run. And even in the moment, like I like it gets me going, right? And so it needs the constant trials to leech off the survivor's fear and terror. That's what feeds the entity. All right, so then let's continue on. In the same journal further down, this is a really long journal, and that's the reason why I needed multiple pages. It's attracted to dark worlds. And it mentions because darkness and chaos are more prevalent. And that the inhabitants rather, they aren't aware of the health and the condition of their world. And thus the conclusion then was that the entity also feeds off of ignorance. People that don't have an awareness of the declining state of their world. So earlier, it feeds off of fear and terror, and then off of ignorance. Just people don't know that everything's going downhill. You know, we're not helping our world. We're not saving our world. We're not helping our fellow humanity. And it's looking for like places where everything's going downhill and everybody's just every man for themselves. And that's what they look for. That's what it looks for, dark worlds. All right, any thoughts here before I continue on? Can you guys still see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, next journal.
I'm watching through your stream.
Oh, you're watching through the stream? All right.
Yeah.
Another thing is that he mentions in another journal that there is a tower and a library. It makes sense because we know he named the tower in his first entry that we see. And we know he has a library because we actually saw him in the video briefly, right? But this is why I highlighted it, to help me cope. You know what that tells us? Is that the observer is starting to fray on the edges. Just as much as like the survivors feel the pressure sitting at the campfire waiting to get summoned, the observer feels like the tension of being helpless to change their reality. And he cites that the tower and the library helped me cope. So his emotional mental state is fraying based on this statement, which is very interesting. That might be why he disappeared, and he had to take a break, a breather. I don't know. All right, and then he says, I continue to search the fog for the memories of those who found a way to escape. And there it is. He's looking not only to find a way to end the entity, but his second purpose is to find a way out. And then that's where I cited that the tower could have like time anomalies. And he says, but then again, I've got time on my hands, lots of time. So the passage of time may slow down or stop at the library because of the council's magic. So he's just sitting there, and you know, time and years may have passed like in the real world, and in the tower maybe it's just frozen. Which is maybe also an explanation why the books, he isn't aware of everything in all the books. Because they're literally being written in real time from his perspective. All right. Next, and this was his final entry. I note this. Life is not life in this prison, and death is not an escape. Here it is. This is where he's explaining the reality that the survivors face every single game. It is merely the start of a new trial, and most survivors are aware they're caught in something. We're caught in a groundhog loop, Groundhog Day, just the same thing over and over. I'm caught in another one. And they're aware they're caught in this loop. And so death is not truly death. It's not going to escape and just cease to exist. And life is not truly life. And so here he states that everybody in this web has the reality that there's other things that are happening that they don't quite understand. And here he is. His sanity is breaking down. The truth is, I don't know what to believe anymore. The entity is not what it is or what I thought it was. And that's the end. Last entry. So it appears that the observer, if he's still alive, is not in great shape. But he did share a lot of information with us. Any other thoughts before we move on from the observer? No. You're like, just make it end. Make it end. All right. Did y'all ever see any journals by Benedict Baker?
Yeah.
Yep, he was a reporter, and he posted a journal where he started this investigation in weeks. Let me get a drink of water right here. And he was following up on missing person reports. I apologize. So let me get a drink of water real quick. Again, I apologize. I'm doing too much talking. All right, go back. All right. So it's interesting that when he started his investigative report, he was just a journalist, right? But there were 364 people that had gone missing in 10 weeks. That's a lot of people in a small town. 364 people gone missing. So this is the first time where, a civilian, a regular person is like, there's something odd happening here, and I need to get to the bottom of it. And thus he starts his adventure that leads down a dark alley. So before I continue to the next slide, is there any thoughts on Benedict Baker that you guys have seen here and there, and you're like, you have a thought about him already?
I didn't come across anything about Benedict Baker in my searches, so.
Off memory, he seemed like a decent guy. Like, he knew kind of what he was looking for. He just never really figured it out all the way.
Yep.
If I remember.
Yep, and that is very true early on. And the curious thing is that just remember, like when we are at this first entry, this is the first entry. Remember 1960 or 1956. Just remember the year, 1956, right? So here he doesn't know what's causing stuff to go missing. He doesn't know. So he does not know anything about the entity in 1956. Just remember that. All right. So then as we go on, the next thing we see in his journals is a few days later, he found the library in that small little town. He's digging around in this basement looking for clues. And the highlighted point, I managed to piece together some parts, and it seems like everything goes back to the McMillan estate. So this is what? Is that chapter? This is the core game is McMillan estate, right? Isn't that Trapper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Trappers.
So that's Trapper map. And he found out, okay, it's a huge industry and, the heart of Weeks. He continues on. He finds some maps, but none of the locals are like willing to take them. Nah, we ain't gonna take you there. We don't want none of that. That's bad business over there. So no one wants to talk about it. So it almost seems like Weeks knows there's like whacked out stuff, but all the locals don't want to like talk about it. Kind of curious, isn't it? So
We don't talk about Bruno.
right. So here he says, "All right, tomorrow I'm going to go off. Even if no one is going to help me, I'm going to go off on my own." Bad mistake. All right. So passage of time has happened here. Right. So notice September 23rd, and it's just sometime in September, the remaining week. And well, what does he say? Last part, I had to travel by foot, and he awoke no memory. And where does he find himself when he awakes? A seemingly never-ending fire that burns next to me. I don't know how long I've laid asleep. So he got pulled in by the fog, and now he's a survivor in the games. But it's interesting that he cited actually leaving the campfire, and he said the area of the woods seemed to have no night or day. It's just gloom, right? Which makes sense because the campfire or the edge of the forest for the killer is just like the DMV waiting room for this entity to summon people. And so he's running around. Later on, he said, "I've tried to hike my way out of the forsaken woods to no avail." And then there's been some times where he's seen things that have human form, obviously killers. And he says, "I can't escape the place," and he feels stalked, which makes sense because that's where the killers are chilling out. And he says, "I just barely managed to escape the forest and come back to the campfire." And he says, "Silence is key, it seems." All right, so this is another point where now it switches to the awakening, which is a later point in his storyline. And then now he knows. Now he knows what he's called this entity. This evil thing, he calls it an entity. And he says the entity curses these innocents, fellow survivors, with an endless game of life and death. And there he's describing not only his own experience, but those of those he's observed and come in contact with. The next entry, obviously, he's died a few times, right? He cites pain from the blades, getting hit in the ribs, blood in his mouth, smell of death. So he's died in some of the trials, and then just coming back to the campfire and restart. And then obviously, having lost a few, he concludes and says, "I yearn for some kind of escape, be it death or life." He just says, "I want out." Next entry, he says, "I have no sense of purpose other than to endlessly." Hold on a second. He's speaking of the entity, and he says, "It has no sense of purpose other than to endlessly torture its victims over and over again. It is torture and not death it seeks, as there's always an escape." Now, I've read theories about this, and the theory is this, although it's not named in the journeys, is that it can feed off of what? We learned from earlier that it feeds off of fear, terror, and what? Ignorance, right?
Yep.
But it also gives us escape gates, right? And so what's a powerful emotion that gets people moving in dire times of adversity? The emotion of hope. Hope. And so by giving the survivors a way, hey, if we can do these generators, something's going to happen and we can turn on this escape gate and we can get out of here. And so then the entity feeds again, but off of the emotion of hope. And so, but the escape gates are from the entity to get the other side of the emotional spectrum of hope and possibility. So he continues on and says, "With each death I feel myself weaken, a little piece of my soul devoured by the darkness before I awake." And so this right here is telling because do you remember I talked about the scrapyard, the graveyard, the void, where like souls are just left? Remember that a while back? Man, this feels like a college lecture. I'm not getting paid though. But that being said, he says, after every death, I feel a little piece of my soul devoured. And so he feels himself just kind of withering away, like after every like match. And then he concludes and says, I fear eventually that I will lose hope. I believe that I have seen traces of others as the beings hunt me. So there he's seeing, okay, he's seen another 3 people like running around like survivors. And then he concludes, all I seek is a soothing, flickering campfire light. I just want to get out of the match, get out of the trial grounds, and get back to the campfire so I can have some relief. So Benedict Baker is like losing it. And he's not doing great. Here he's talking about the killers, and he cites that they are given, middle paragraph, they're given the commission to hunt and kill the prey set in front of them. And this is the highlight. Some go willingly, and others need to be convinced. And that being, we know from one of the killers that the entity has tortured a person with a good moral compass until they're so broken that they finally agree to become a killer. And so we've seen that. The spirit. Well, we don't know the name of the spirit. The killer, the spirit. Wasn't she originally like avenging her father's death or something like that?
Rin, yeah.
Yeah. So she was kind of coerced. There's some other killers that they were tortured. I think maybe even the trapper was tortured to become a killer.
Yeah.
But we'll learn more about that at a later time. So the entity tortures potential killers until they are much less human, and they finally take up the mantle and become a killer doing his will. He cites... Yeah, go ahead.
The last couple sentences of this seem to suggest a couple of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
One is that sometimes survivors are chosen as survivors to be tortured into becoming killers.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is that potentially Benedict Baker, the reason we don't see him in the game as a survivor is because maybe he's become a killer.
Now there you are. You picked the second one. Well, the first one I believe to be true. Absolutely. The second one is a very popular, very popular player base request. And they say
I've seen a lot of people theorizing that
we want him as a killer.
Yeah.
They think that he's based on his brokenness in his journals that he's ready.
Because the last 2 lines he says, the killers are needed to feed the entity with the hope that keeps it alive. I am a pawn in this parasitic charade.
Right. So we see his mental and emotional integrity being compromised match after match. So player base, like a few years ago, pre-pandemic, there was a lot of players who thought he'd be a future killer. It hasn't happened yet, but a lot of player base thought that based on these journals, that he was a future killer in the making. Like he would be like a DLC like killer, like a unique killer. All right, and then what else? This is a mystery. So if you're a viewer, if you're a panelist, if you're anybody, I want to know what this is. I don't know, and I was not able to find it. He said, my travels have revealed 4 hellish places connected by one true evil. I assume he's talking about the entity, but I want to know what those 4 places are. He doesn't name it. That's interesting that of all the places that he's gone to, all the maps, all the places he's been sent to in the trial grounds, he said there's 4 places that are whacked out and they're hellish places. I'm curious what in his mind he considers to be the 4 worst places. He doesn't say. Now he does mention a fabric between the real world and the dream world, so maybe he considers like Freddy's world, Freddy's map to be one of those places, maybe. That would be my theory, but I'm curious. That's something I could not find. I did not find an answer for that. There's no elaboration.
Just with this is from Google's AI overview. Suggests the McMillan Estate, home of the Trapper.
Okay, that's fair.
Auto Haven Wreckers, home of the Wraith.
Okay, all right.
Coldwind Farm, home of the Hillbilly.
Huh.
And Crotus Pren Asylum, home of the Nurse.
I don't know. Some of them
So
are
that's just
pretty nondescript, though. I can see
that's
McMillan.
just
I can.
AI overview.
Yeah, I can see McMillan because what? There was 300 and some people just like toasted. They're gone. They're missing.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the other maps to know. Maybe possible, but that's a mystery
I
I'd like
mean,
to look into. That I'm curious about myself. I theorize
the
that one of the worlds is Dream World, the Freddy map, because he names the real world and the Dream World, which is Freddy. That's his map. I'm
the
s-
the Awakening tome is one of the ones that we first find out of the tomes, I think.
Mhm.
So I assume it's probably the maybe not the four exactly the ones that Ricky said, but it's probably like that kind of idea.
Mhm. That's interesting. But yeah, so maybe there's more mysteries as to like what the four places are. So if we can find that, I'm morbidly curious to know what the four places are. I think McMillan, the McMillan estate, Freddy Dream World because he actually names that, and then the last two are unknown. But I'm kind of curious to see if there's more in it. And then the last highlights, I have all the time in the world, but only during the small pauses that I'm granted. So he's speaking about being at the campfire. During the hunt, my time is restrained. So he's talking about like eventually the killer is going to end everybody. He's going to find me. So I'm on the clock. And
Hello.
let's see here. Yeah, hold on one second here. We're in the middle of a live stream. If you can depart, that would be appreciated from chat. That'd be great. How do you? Is just remove? Is that how you do it? What's the
Kick
So.
is usually the
kick?
if you right click
Okay,
and hit
yeah, kick.
uh
Okay.
kick from voice chat.
Okay. No, that's not it. How do you do that?
If you right click
Yep.
on their
Yep.
name,
Yep.
does it say disconnect?
Yes, it does. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's just something. Okay. So let me see here. Revealed. Okay, I was distracted. Sorry about that. So he understands that he does have some relief when he's at the campfire, but when he's being hunted, like you can feel the time crunch, and that's true. Like if you're in a match and you're playing Survivor, like you feel the time clocking down. You like hear like someone and then they get put on the hook, and you know like hey, eventually they're gonna run out of like people to hunt, and then I'm the lucky contestant. But as we get to the very very end, this is why I think the player base feels that he might become or has become a killer. When he asks the question, what is to become of me? Have the killers started out at this campfire too? I bid this journal adieu. I must focus on staying alive. And so the player base tends to think, as a majority, that Benedict Baker is a killer at this point. He's become so corrupted by the entity that he then reminisces and asks, I wonder if other killers have started out at this campfire too. He didn't say, have the killer started out at this campfire. He said, have the killer started out at this campfire too. And so he's thinking, is this the exact place where other killers got so out of it that they turned to the dark side too? I tend to think that he's lost his moral compass. All right, let me keep on going here. All right. Now, what year did he start his search? At the Macmillan State,
1956.
1956. And he didn't know about the entity. He didn't know about the games. And yet, what do we see here?
1896.
And here, what does he say? How does he start? This thing that I dubbed the entity. So at this journal, he's already understood and named it the entity. How did he go back in time?
In the TARDIS, of course.
Right, right. So I think that there's two possibilities. This is a mystery within the Dead by Daylight realm. There are people that still they talk about this like occasionally. I'm sure. But I think two things have happened. A, he's become so disoriented that when talking to other survivors, he's like, "Well, hey, where did you come from? Oh, you came from you came from Florida? Well, what year is it in Florida when you got taken by the fog? Oh, it's and I think that he is like asking fellow survivors and then he's like confused with the passage of his own story. So either A, he's gone back in time actually, like he did not know the entity in 1956, but then names the entity in 1896. So he's actually gone back in time, or he's become so disoriented in this nightmare realm that he's lost his sense of time. He's lost his own timeline. He just doesn't know anymore. And he thinks it's
Or
1896.
another possibility could be a combination of the two, where maybe the timeline in the entity's realm is behind. He forgot what year it is, came across a calendar in the entity's timeline that said 1896.
Oh, or maybe when he gets spawned into maps, there's stuff
Yeah.
sitting all over the place. Like you go into uh, now obviously upside down is the wrong year, but some places have like just random documents and stuff on walls and books. And maybe when he's getting spawned to trial grounds, he actually finds something that says 1896, and he's like, okay, well, I guess right now in time it's 1896, and then writes it in his own journal.
Yeah,
But
'cause in
that
some
is
of
an
the
interesting.
memories
Oh, I'm
of
sorry.
some of the survivors that I've researched, it talks about like sometimes when they're in the trial grounds, they'll be searching through the trial grounds for information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So that could have been where
and
he came across 1896.
yeah, and the other thing is we find where we have killers and survivors from all different timelines. Like
Yeah.
all eras of time are represented. Like old school all the way to like modern. So
It's somewhat futuristic with one of the killers.
yeah,
One
yeah,
of the killers is just a straight robot.
yeah. And so we're on slide 30, and it's gonna pick up faster, I think. All right.
All right.
All right. And he says, I can only provide you with one advice: always keep moving forward. Harvest every. Now this right here is where he's talking about finding stuff that other survivors have dropped. So like say I get hooked or I get Franklin demised and I drop my toolbox. He's saying I advise always keep moving, and then if I'm going to further advise, every time you go into every forsaken location, look for anything that would help you. So he's been picking up like random stuff in his trials, just like we do when we play. But he must have thought like his time was short, because look at the very end of his last journal.
You find me, bury my body.
So either maybe he's thinking, like, hey, like this is the last go. I don't got anything else left. Unknown, but it's interesting that his last words are, if you find me, bury my body. All right, so the next, we've gone from Observer, we've gone to Benedict Baker. The third one we have is Vigo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. They're an inventor and a researcher. They entered into the fog to study the entity, and there's a little bit of lore, but we can find out some things by their items. They're also the only survivor to escape the entity and to find other ways to help survivors in their own trial grounds. His notes and blueprints help even today. So, like, some of the Vigo blueprints are part of your blood trees. So we interact with like stuff from Vigo that was like left to help us. But it's interesting that he actually found a way of escaping. The Vigo journal, the man with a way out is God. And so he's like, hey, it's really special if you find a way out of the trial grounds and out of the realm of the and out of the influence of the entity. And there's some other thoughts. We got the engineer toolbox. I thought the last one was kind of morbid, like the jar of salty lips. It's kind of superstitious, doesn't it seem superstitious to you?
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, and if I remember in game, that's not even particularly like great. I don't think. But anywho, yeah, kind of curious. He continues on with the shroud. That's relatively recent, right? Isn't that something that's one of his newer items? Isn't that one of his newer items?
I think
know.
so. I've never seen it before. So.
Yeah. It's. I think it's newer, and we're just starting to see the fog vials in more gameplay. We're seeing that more often now. That's where you just throw it down and it gives you like 5 seconds to get out. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is so great. That's a great survivor escape tool.
As a killer main, it is so annoying.
Right. Because you throw it down right before you have a break, like right left, and you throw it down and then you like choose. But then the killer, they don't got enough time to really see unless they're right up on you. But he does make a statement when he's writing his note about the shroud. He says, "Only now do I understand how to bend the fog's rules." And so here he's saying, like, I found ways of doing stuff that I shouldn't have been able to do in the trial grounds, but I found a way. And so because of him, we got some really good stuff. This is the most impactful survivor to us for the most part. Like in the actual like trials, it's the Vigo stuff that actually helps us escape or survive. The tools and stuff that he's left. The vial, I think that's great in game. It's very nondescript in lore though. And then the rainbow map. Now I thought this was interesting. What is in game? What does a rainbow map do for us?
I don't know. I've never actually used one.
You like press a button and then it like shows you where all the doors are. Sometimes it shows you where hatches. It shows you where pallets are, windows. Sometimes where chests are. So it's like a oh, and then some of them you can create like a beam of light, so like a marker in the map. So this he somehow found a way of bringing magical items into the trial grounds because rainbow map is not mechanical in nature; it's magical in nature. So it's interesting that they found a way of magic manipulation as well. But he commented and said nothing usable to get out of this nightmare. It'll help you learn about what's around you, but it's not going to get you out. It's just going to show you where stuff is. But that was if you're trying to like find hatch or you're trying to find late game stuff and your purpose is to find hatch, rainbow maps, that's boss. That's what you want. You want the maps with the keys. Maps and keys. Maps or keys. And then here we are. What's the other way of escaping? Is what, the escape gates, and then what else?
The hatch.
The hatch. And this is the document that I think is the greatest gift to survivors, is Vigo's blueprint. And this verbiage indicates to me that he's the inventor of the hatch, not the entity. It increases the chance of spawning the hatch in the main building. So the design and the functionality of the hatch, that is from Vigo. And so that is their greatest gift to survivors. But before we go on, I apologize. I kind of ran out of time, but his greatest personal achievement is he found a way of using the putrid flowers of escaping. You know, like during the blight events, you got to collect the flowers. They look like this kind of blobs. We'll see it in another picture further down. But he uses the flowers to escape. And that's how Vigo got out of the grasp of the entity, is he did something with the flowers that let him get out and escape. All right, so that's the third one, and then this is the last one of the night. We're on slide 35. We're at let me see. Let me look at our time. Give me a moment here. We are at an hour and 20 minutes. We're doing fine. But the next live streams will be shorter. We're gonna pick up the pace. This is the longest live stream that we're gonna have in this series, I think. The fourth one that I want to talk about is kind of the really kind of a sad story, but the alchemist, and then what we know as the blight. And we know the alchemist found Vigo's laboratory and notes. The interesting thing is that when you look around online to find out information about the laboratory, you can't find anything. You know it exists because he was doing experiments and he was tinkering and making inventions. So he had to have had a laboratory, but there's no actual like note that tells us about just that place. And then he began experimenting on the killers. His most famous one is when he experimented on the doctor and really messed him up. But he lost his way and eventually his soul. And so he started as a survivor alchemist, you know, with like really sketchy moral code. But then when he really went downhill, and then he became a killer. I think by choice. We do have a picture of the Blight. This is what he looks like as a killer. You've seen him around. I don't see a lot of him. I don't play against the Blight very often. Have you guys seen a lot of Blight killers in games much? Did I lose human?
Not on
Did
my
human
level.
fall asleep? Did I put human to sleep? I think I put human to sleep.
No.
I haven't seen a whole lot of Blight. I used to see a lot more of them, but
I remember when I first played
not
against him, I
lately.
thought this Muppet is like a pinball machine. He's just like bouncing around off of walls. I think he's not as popular because he's really difficult to control. That's my theory.
He's one of the harder ones.
Yeah, I think like a really high ceiling, skill ceiling type killer. Like you're not just gonna pick him up and like start 4King like quick. Very high skill ceiling for the Blight. And then the little blobs in this picture, the little black part that looks like those are the actual Blight or putrid flowers that got him out.
Turned into the
Yeah, the
stew.
Vigo got out with. And it's also what Blight was trying to find to be able to escape with, but he failed. He couldn't find a flower, so he like ran out of materials.
He turned, or actually, I suppose I'll leave that for the character stuff.
But that's the picture. I do not have a picture of him as a alchemist, unknown. But that is a picture of what the putrid flowers look like that Vigo used and exploited, and that the Blight was trying to find desperately trying to find more flowers, but he couldn't find them. So that's unknown what his obstacles were, unless he used up the materials.
I don't think they ever showed the alchemist's face.
No, they didn't. That's not
I
there.
think it was just a cloaked guy.
I don't think these are years. The 17, I don't think that's a year. That's not a year. That's just a memory number. So now
Yeah.
remember, now that we're talking about a memory, this is now a part of the observer's realm, because memories are what the observer can see and read. So now this is the observer reminiscing about the blight. And then here's his thoughts. He remembers the killers and experimenting. And then you can see like the hesitation, the dot dot dot, the hesitation, the question marks. So the memories that the observer is seeing, he's like, these are incomplete memories, but what we know is the blight, he doesn't remember what he was trying to remember. He's like losing his thought, his train of thought. He's losing his memories. He doesn't remember why he's trying to do things. So it shows a lot of disorientation by the alchemist at this point. Here we see he caused a lot of suffering, but he doesn't feel remorse. So there's the lack of moral code. He doesn't feel anything but an ache in the pit of his stomach for power. So we do know that he was like power tripping when he was experimenting. Then it continues on and says that he remembers experimenting on the doctor. Oh gosh, that's pretty whack. Experimenting on him like he had done with so many others, but where? Not here, somewhere else, another world. So remember, if you look up the Dead by Daylight store and you go to the Blight section, you can see all the killers, and if you look closely, all of them have syringes like somewhere in their body. So every killer that has a Blight version basically got experimented on by the alchemist before he became the Blight. And the syringe is the alchemist injecting them with like the serum, trying to see how they'll respond. With the serum is like a byproduct of the putrid flower, so he's trying to figure out how entities respond to like a concentrated dose of that. And but we don't know where he was experimenting. It's assumed that if the killers are waiting on the outside of the forest, that he has access to the campfire or the edge of the forest, and then he's like stabbing people with a syringe, like Dexter Morgan style, in the forest.
Well, if he was freely able to travel between worlds, it's very likely he snuck up on the killers while they were watching the survivors.
Yes, and that's actually, if you look, some of the places where the syringes are, they're like, he didn't just walk up and say, "Hey, sir, hey, ma'am, would it be okay if I injected you with this?" He just walked up and just stabbed him with the stuff. Like in the doctor, it's like in the back of his shoulder blade. Like he didn't have a chance.
Off of memory, in Pyramid Head, it's like the back of his right shoulder blade is where he's been stabbed.
Right. And if viewers are curious, like, oh, Mal, are you exaggerating? No. If you go to the store, and go to the section that has the blight part of the store, and it'll show a gallery of all the killers that have a blight version, like a blight skin, and all of them have the alchemist syringes. All of them are experiments of the alchemist before he turned and became the blight. So he actually was like pretty whack. Although he had to have had some kind of moral code, because now you know that the survivors have a blight skin as well, but it's usually like a glowy orange, somewhere on their clothing, right? But the survivors don't have any syringes, which meant he only experimented on the killers. But he somehow, I would assume that the survivors, they came in contact with stuff and it just kind of smeared on their clothes. But that might not have been because of the alchemist. I think the alchemist only experimented on the killers. All right, so let's keep on going. I wanna get this done before midnight. Yeah. All right. He said he doesn't want to be snatched for another trial to suffer or cause suffering. Here he's having remorse. He's like, man, I don't want to like I don't want to deal with this stuff. I don't want this. I don't even want to do this anymore. So he's showing some kind of remorse. But here he's saying he's looking and he's hungering for a flower, for a serum. And he knows the entity knows that he knows about. I know that's kind of a catchphrase, but the entity knows that the alchemist is close to finding a solution. And he's trying to find it, trying to find it, trying to find it. But he was unsuccessful. And then the next paragraph, he doesn't want to be pulled into another trial. He wants to return home. He must return home. That's why he was studying the serum. It gave him insight, but then he forgets. Insight to what? He does. Oh, I don't remember. Don't remember. All he remembers and desires is getting home, wherever home is. And he only remembers the void. And this is where we have context. Hundreds, maybe thousands of discarded survivors, not dead, not alive, just kind of zombified. And then in his words, burnt, emotionless, useless to the entity. And so he was there because he saw it. And he's like looking out on this massive crowd of suffering shells of old survivors. And then notice he remembers rising from the void, finding a flower. Had this flower been his salvation? Had the flower been his way out? So either he used his last serum to get out of the void, or he made a deal with the entity, and then after this point he becomes the blight. So whether maybe the entity says, all right, I'll give you a serum, which will get you out of the void, but if you want a serum, you're going to have to work for me now. That might have been the condition of the deal, is he gets out of the void, and he gets one serum to escape the void, but then he has to become a killer for the rest of his existence. And he continues to look. He needs serum. And then once he returns, his hunger confuses him, oppresses him. He'd do anything for that feeling again, anything, even return to the trials. So here he's reminiscing, I'd be willing to be a survivor again. But then look at this. Look at this break in his mind. He'd rip survivors and killers apart limb from limb for that feeling again. What? Finding the serum. And he begins to mumble a promise of one flower, I will do anything. And then he starts mental breakdown. He's having a mental breakdown. And then what do we know about the trial grounds? So the trial grounds, that's where the survivors get summoned to try to escape, and where the killers get summoned to try to kill. It's this basically like this trial ground where we would say we're entering into a match. But this is what's there. Each departure from the campfire is into confusion. They don't know where they're going or who they're going to be sent with. And then notice the verbiage. Slowly I learn the different places, recognizing features and buildings, but I never actually understand the pattern. So like if I load into a match, I don't, unless I use like one of those burnt offerings for like a map or something, I don't know where it's going to send me, like even if I'm a player. So we as players even feel like this we don't know if there's a pattern. Is like, are we going to get like the Macmillan map like on Saturdays in the morning? No. I mean, is it going to be every 10th time we load into a match where there's no pattern? Unless someone brings in like a map offering. It's all random. So this is what the survivor is expressing. What the blight is expressing. And he cites as if some powerful force is shuffling the world as it were a deck of cards. And then shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Okay, let's start a new match. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Don't know who the killer is. Don't know who the survivors is. Shuffle, 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 shuffle like a deck of cards. Here's the visualization of what the killer and the survivor feel every time they get summoned by the entity. It's just a random thing. You can't create a pattern. It's just shuffle a deck of cards and let's see what the killer is. Let's see what the survivors are. Let's see what the map is. And every time it's different. All right, so this is the last slide. Everybody say last slide. Last slide. Oh, they're like, oh, thank goodness, it's the last.
I remember this image.
The slide 45. I know the viewers. When you watch it on YouTube later, you're gonna be like, oh Lord, What have you done? I work in a corporate job and I like create, presentations, and I create Excel sheets and PowerPoints and this and that and a lot of stuff for like my corporate job. And so I know just enough PowerPoint to be kind of dangerous, but this is the flow chart of what happens as the survivor. So the top of the screen is what happens as the survivor. They start at the campfire. Now you can't see a cursor, but that's that long box on the top. They start at the campfire, and then you'll see a blue down arrow. So then they get summoned by the entity, right? The survivor, that's S for survivor. So the entity summons them, and then they summon them where? To the trial grounds, which is the middle of the screen. But then from the other side, the edge of the forest on the bottom, the big bar on the bottom, that's the killer perspective, or maybe Blight when he's a killer. They get summoned by the entity, and then they get sent to the subrealm of whatever's related to their character. So they might start in a subrealm. And then, you know how like survivors always start the match before the killer activates? So that's kind of like that waiting room. And then depending on the power of the killer, the trial grounds and the subrealms, they kind of interact, right? Now, in the middle, we see the trial grounds, and then okay, we're say us, it's a 3v1. It's me, Ricky, and Human, and maybe Siri. She died on the second hook, and she's like gone early in the match. She's gone, right?
Banded on first.
Right. She got tunneled, right? And so what would happen is we get summoned. We as survivors get summoned to trial grounds. The killer gets summoned in. And then at that point in time, we kind of hack it out. We're trying to grind generators. The survivors or the killers trying to hunt down all the survivors like chickens. They're running around chasing them. And eventually, people start falling, maybe left and right. Maybe Siri's the first one to get last hook. And then at that point in time, Siri leaves the trial ground, and then there's a result. She either escaped or she got killed. And then the same for Human, the same for Ricky, the same for Mal. And then eventually even the killer leaves match, and then they go to the result area where there are some things that could happen. So say, for example, if Human, they escape, they can only escape two ways, at least that I could think of. They could escape via the hatch, and that's from, remember the Vigo blueprint? Or escape gates. They finish all the generators, and then we can like finally power on that stupid switch and like run out of the map via the gate. So that at that point in time, the survivors win, and then if you look down, the entity is displeased, and then the killer gets disciplined or tortured after the match. And you actually know that's true because the exit screen for playing a killer, if you get a 0K, it says the entity hungers, and sometimes it says entity displeased. And then from story lore, we know that killers can get tortured and tormented for, not doing what the entity wants, right? And then they go to edge of forest, whereas all of the survivors, regardless of whether they win or lose, they also go back to the campfire and just wait it out. If the survivors win, if the survivors get killed, they could get killed by a Mori, which is a gift from the entity to the killer. So that entity gave the killer a special means of fulfilling their goal, a Mori. And Human, do you remember a few weeks ago when we were playing Dead by Daylight and I got killed by Myers before the first hook? He just ended me.
Yep.
He downed me, and I didn't even get a hook. He just ended me right there in the street. So he used his entity given like blessing to just finish Mal right then and there. And then that was a Mori. It's called a Mori. And then obviously it could be like, okay, all right, let's put Mal on a hook. And then you either die on hook or you die through struggle. And then eventually you see like the entity that kind of clamp down, and there's these claws like coming down, and they're like starting to like, injure your character. So those are the ways that the survivors could win or lose. And then if the killer starts smoking people and they got 3-4 kills, then the entity, they're pleased. And then somehow they get rewarded. We don't actually know from the lore how the entity rewards the killers. That's unknown. But if they get tortured and tormented, certainly there has to be some kind of reward. And then they go back to the edge of the forest and wait to get summoned again by the entity. On the far right side of the screen, you'll see that the Vigo laboratory has access to the campfire and to the trial grounds. But the entity does not have access to the laboratory because it can't find it. The entity has tried, but it has not been able to find the Vigo laboratory. But somehow the alchemist or Blight found the Vigo lab, which is how he was able to access the edge of the forest and stab all the killers with the serum syringes, and also how he's able to himself interact with the survivors somehow. So that's kind of a special area, and although it's not really shown here per se, but technically, actually I did put it. Right above the trial grounds is the tower. It doesn't show that the tower can interact with the campfire, the edge of the forest, or the trial grounds, but the memories that happen in the trial grounds and also in campfire. And it was also mentioned by Ricky earlier that it has access to memories from before the fog. Just go into the tower. Nothing leaves the tower per se that we can tell. So that's kind of the process flow of what happens with the killers and survivors. So thoughts. I know all of our brains are leaking out of our heads at this point in time with so much information. What are your thoughts? Anything you want to add about any of the special entities? Benedict or Vigo or the Observer or the Alchemist, Blight, anything you want to add?
Talbot.
Huh?
His name was Talbot Grimes. The Blight.
Oh, was it? Was that his real name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, wait.
They
So you're saying, all right, hold on one second here. I saw him somewhere.
I don't know if you had any in the presentation. I kept looking for it and I didn't see any.
I know I had him somewhere. I feel bad that I'm kind of scrolling in real time. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I had it somewhere, but
It's like every time you reference the alchemist,
right here, Talbot Grimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so why would the Okay, no. Never mind. Okay, so this right here, this quote is the alchemist or Blight talking about Vigo who found a way of escaping. He said the man who found a way out is God. So he's talking about Vigo. Now it comes together for me. I was like, who the mess is Talbot?
When he found the journal in the lab or the campfire, whichever, I don't remember. That's him reading out the journal. It's his quote, but it's from the journal.
Ah, okay. All right. That's interesting. All right. So that is the thoughts that I had put together plus the contributions from the panelists. And was there any other thoughts about the trial grounds?
Ricky taking a nap.
He's like, it's too much information. Make it stop.
All I'm saying is, if you go into the trial grounds with a flashlight, I'm coming for you specifically.
Right.
Watch out. Watch out.
Right. That's exactly the case. When I load in as a killer, if I look at all the gear and I'm like, if I see a flashlight, no, I don't need that in my life.
Like, I don't care. If there's one person with a flashlight, I am tunneling you. I do not care.
I would rather have a 1K that ends a flashlight person than a 3K with like just regular like toolboxes and med kits.
especially because like flashlight people can't be normal. Okay, they can't like run away, drop a pallet, see if you're gonna break it, and if you don't break it immediately, continue running.
Immediately we'll put the flashlight as soon as the pallet's down.
They just
actually,
sit
yeah.
there and watch you until the moment you decide to press spacebar, and then they're like, "Here, flashlight."
Yep.
Oh, the truth comes out indeed. The truth comes out indeed. All right, now we know. Now we know who's on the edge of the forest.
I don't know about you guys,
Uh,
but I would much prefer a survivor with the fog vial than a flashlight.
Yeah. Sad part is,
Agreed.
like the flashlight. You know, you try to break a pallet and then they like flashlight you. You try to like hook someone or you pick someone up from getting down and you got some muppet like trying to shine it in your face. Yeah, it's
I
pretty
would-
whack.
I would much rather have someone running around sabotaging hooks every time I pick up one of their teammates than someone run around with a flashlight.
Yeah, I agree on that. I agree. But that being said, I think Mel managed the time reasonably. We're at an hour and 45 minutes. So technically we would be finishing 15 minutes before a normal live stream.
Yup.
That's pretty decent. Pretty decent timing.
There was one of the wikis I read. I don't remember exactly which one. I'll have to find it afterwards. But it was when you disconnect from a match, like when you escape, quit, and stuff,
right?
the entity doesn't always immediately pull you out. Sometimes it leaves you there for a bit. Is like the canonical reason for it. And it was like when it actually pulls you out after it's like trying to reconnect with your computer, the lore reason from what I heard was that the entity realized you lost hope and it put you out of the match.
So it sent
That
you to the void.
it temporarily sends you to the void, and then if you get back into the game and like reconnect after it kicks you out, it sends you to the results area instead. It just pulls you back.
Interesting. I know sometimes this is an observation. I don't have any lore to speculate on it, but sometimes when I jump hatch, like there's a lag. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's like sometimes as much as like 5 seconds after I jump before it hits. Like there's just something is being calculated or done that doesn't.
Yeah.
Like there was one time where I actually jumped hatch. I got hatch, and then it loaded me to black screen, and I could hear like the footsteps of the people like running, the rest of the people running at summary screen, but it wouldn't let me like click OK, and I'd escape and it'd be like you're about ready to leave, you're gonna lose all your benefits, all your whatever, and I actually lost like a week ago. I actually lost a hatch escape because of that. It was pretty weird. I'm not sure why.
That
But-
might be something to submit a bug report about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that probably was legitimately a bug. Yeah, but I
Kind of like when Backrooms wouldn't let us play multiplayer.
right. Yeah, we'll have to come back and try to get that. I think I saw they did an update of some kind, but we'll check into
Yeah.
that later. But
It's been working a bit more consistently
Has
when
it?
they added the new one.
so one last open invite to any comment about what we've been talking about tonight, or do we think we like talked more than we can ever talk? Do we talk everything that we've dealt with, or is there like we're just tired out and we're done?
I think we're all I'm all talked out for now.
He's like, I've heard enough of Mal. I want this ended.
You know,
I-
all I'll need is instructions on where to send the information I have on my characters for next week, and I'll be
Gotcha.
set. So
I'll get that later.
Is, yeah, he'll make a thread for you.
Yeah, I'll
in
make a
the
thread. Yep.
server.
Alright.
There is something. It's not exactly talk, but if you look at the text chat for this voice channel,
Mhm.
I put the screenshot of the observer before he was taken out.
Oh, really?
If you want to look at that,
Oh, okay. Check on this.
that was from my older brother. He screenshotted this. I'm
Oh,
pretty
yeah,
sure.
yeah, you're right. Yep. I see the little device and the books off in the background. Yes.
I would do that, but my Discord has blanked out, so I just have a
Oh.
gray screen on
I'll-
my second monitor, which
we'll-
is why I
we'll-
was watching via your stream.
We'll show it next week. We'll show it as a reference
Yeah.
point. But I want to thank each of you for showing up, and I know a lot of the content you were seeing for the first time, and I am thankful that you stuck it out to the end and you commented where you had observations and different insights. And this, I believe, will be the longest live stream in this series because this basically covers how people are interacting with the environment. And then now we get to more
Mhm.
like character stories, which we can speed through that a bit faster. But I want to thank each of you for coming out and being a part of the first week of Dead by Daylight lore series. And I'm gonna go get a drink of water and sit in my recliner and relax. But it's been fun, and again, thank you so much for coming out. And Siri, if you watch this at a later point in time, thank you so much for showing up for the first half hour. I hope you had a fun night, and I hope that all of you have a great night as well. So I will catch you guys later. Be good.
Yeah.
Later.
Bye
See ya.
bye.
Bye.